Standing tall against the endless horizon of Easter Island, the Moai statues guard their secrets like silent sentinels of the past. These towering stone figures, some weighing as much as 80 tons, have puzzled explorers, scientists, and dreamers for centuries. How did an ancient civilization without modern tools or machinery manage to carve, transport, and erect these colossal monoliths across miles of rugged terrain? The mystery deepens when you consider one startling possibility. What if these giants didn't need to be dragged or carried at all? What if, against all logic, they walked? Picture this, a line of massive stone statues, each taller than a two-story building, slowly rocking forward with a rhythmic sway, as if guided by invisible hands. It sounds like something out of myth, but this is the heart of the walking theory, a controversial idea that's reignited debates among archaeologists and historians. According to this theory, the island's ancestors might have used a clever combination of ropes, manpower, and precise coordination to walk the Moai upright, step by painstaking step to their final resting places. Imagine the sight, a procession of stone giants, moving almost like living beings, their shadows stretching across the island as they journeyed to their sacred spots. This isn't just a story about rocks and ropes, it's a testament to human ingenuity, a reminder of what our ancestors could achieve with nothing but determination and creativity. The Moai aren't just statues, they're time capsules, holding clues to a lost world of innovation and belief. And today, we're going to unravel this enigma piece by piece. We'll explore the evidence, weigh the arguments, and even recreate the experiments that brought this wild theory to life. By the end, you might just find yourself asking, could the impossible have been possible after all? The journey begins now. The Moai statues of Easter Island are more than just stone figures, they're a staggering feat of human craftsmanship. Carved from solidified volcanic ash, these monoliths tower as high as 33 feet, with some tipping the scales at a jaw-dropping 80 tons. That's heavier than a fully loaded semi-truck, and they weren't just one or two. Nearly 900 of these giants once stood across the island, their stern gazes fixed inland, watching over the Rapa Nui people like silent guardians. But what makes them truly extraordinary isn't just their size or sheer number, it's the fact that they were carved, transported, and erected centuries ago, on an isolated island without metal tools, wheels, or beasts of burden. For the Rapa Nui, these statues were far more than art. They were sacred vessels believed to hold the spirits of revered ancestors, linking the living to the divine. Each Moai was painstakingly shaped with stone tools, their features honed to reflect the faces of chiefs and elders, their backs often inscribed with intricate petroglyphs telling stories of lineage and power. Placed on ceremonial platforms called ahu, they were the centerpieces of rituals, their presence a bridge between earth and the afterlife. Yet the greatest puzzle isn't how they were carved, it's how they traveled. The quarries where the Moai were born lie deep in the volcanic crater of Rapa. From there, the statues had to cross miles of rugged terrain, some dragged over hills, others maneuvered across uneven ground. For decades, the dominant theory was that they were laid horizontally on log sledges, pulled by teams of laborers. But recent experiments and oral traditions suggest something far more dynamic. Legends speak of the statues walking themselves to their altars, guided by the divine will of chiefs or priests. Could there be truth buried in these stories? Modern researchers have put the walking theory to the test, using replicas and ropes to mimic the described motion. The result, a slow, swaying advance where teams rock the statue side to side, edging it forward with each tilt. It's a mesmerizing sight, one that mirrors the islanders' own accounts. Yet skeptics point to the risks. A single misstep could send tons of stone crashing to the ground, shattering months of work. So why take the chance? The answer might lie in the Rapa Nui's worldview, where the boundaries between myth and method blur. Perhaps the walk wasn't just practical, it was ceremonial, a dance of stone and spirit that turned transport into a sacred act. The Moai challenge us to rethink what ancient societies were capable of. They stand as monuments not just to the dead, but to the living ingenuity of the people who birthed them. Every groove in their stone, every mile they crossed, whispers a question. If they could move mountains, what else might history have underestimated? For generations, the prevailing explanation for how the Moai traveled across Easter Island involved a method as straightforward as it was backbreaking: logs. According to this traditional theory, teams of workers would fell trees to create a pathway of rollers, then carefully lower the massive statues onto wooden sledges before inching them forward, log by log, across the uneven landscape. At first glance, it makes sense. We've seen similar techniques used in other ancient cultures, from Egypt's pyramid stones to Stonehenge's megaliths. The idea of rolling heavy objects on logs is practically textbook, but when you examine the details, this theory starts to unravel like a frayed rope under too much strain. First, there's the issue of Easter Island's infamous deforestation. By the time European explorers arrived in the 18th century, the island was almost entirely stripped of its once lush palm forests. If the Rapa Nui people relied on logs to move hundreds of multi-ton statues, where did all that wood come from? Studies suggest the island's trees were already dwindling by the time the later Moai were erected, raising the question: how could they sustain such a resource-intensive method for centuries? Then there's the sheer physics of the task. Moving an 80-ton block of volcanic rock horizontally isn't just a matter of brute strength, it's a delicate balancing act. Experiments have shown that log rollers can snap under the weight, and uneven terrain could send a statue careening off its path, risking catastrophic damage. Even with a small army of laborers, the friction and instability make the process far more precarious than it first appears. Some researchers argue that the island's rocky, volcanic soil would have been especially unforgiving, with jagged outcrops and sudden slopes turning a slow crawl into a logistical nightmare. And yet, this theory persisted for decades, partly because it fit a familiar narrative. After all, if other ancient cultures used rollers and sledges, why wouldn't the Rapa Nui? But here's the catch: Easter Island isn't just any other place. Its isolation, scarce resources, and unique cultural practices demand solutions as distinctive as the statues themselves. The log theory, while plausible on the surface, overlooks the ingenuity of a people who thrived in one of the most remote corners of the world. Perhaps the most telling clue lies in the Moai themselves. Many of the statues found along ancient transport routes are upright, not lying flat as the log theory would suggest. Some even bear marks on their bases consistent with being rocked or pivoted, not dragged. These details hint at a method far more dynamic, one that might align eerily well with those age-old legends of walking giants. The debate isn't just about rocks and ropes. It's a window into how we interpret the past and how easily we project our own assumptions onto ancient cultures. The log theory, for all its flaws, reminds us that history is rarely as simple as it seems. And sometimes the most enduring mysteries force us to rethink what we thought we knew. In 2012, archaeologists Terry Hunt and Carl Lipo turned centuries of conventional wisdom on its head with a radical proposition. What if the Moai statues didn't need logs, sledges, or even flat ground to travel? What if instead they moved upright, swaying rhythmically like a giant walking? This wasn't just a whimsical thought experiment. Hunt and Lipo, armed with a deep understanding of Rapa Nui culture and a willingness to challenge assumptions, set out to prove their audacious theory with something rarely seen in archaeology: a live demonstration. Their inspiration came from an unexpected source: the island's own oral traditions. For generations, Rapa Nui elders had spoken of the statues walking to their platforms, guided by the mana or spiritual power of their ancestors. Scholars had long dismissed these stories as poetic metaphor, but Hunt and Lipo wondered, could there be literal truth hidden in these legends? To find out, they teamed up with engineers and local volunteers to recreate the process using a concrete replica of a moai, scaled down to a mere 10 feet tall and weighing just 5 tons. Even at this reduced size, the experiment was daunting. The method was deceptively simple. Teams positioned on either side of the statue used sturdy ropes to tilt it forward, rocking it from one side to the other in a controlled sway. With each tilt, the statue's base pivoted slightly, allowing it to walk forward in tiny, deliberate increments. The result was astonishing. The moai replica inched ahead with an almost lifelike gait, its motion eerily reminiscent of the islanders' ancestral stories. Video of the experiment went viral, captivating audiences with the surreal sight of a stone giant seemingly strolling across the landscape. But the walking theory wasn't just about spectacle. Hunt and Lipo's research revealed practical advantages to this method. Unlike log rolling, which required vast amounts of timber and a cleared path, walking the moai upright minimized resource use. The statue's carved bases, slightly curved like the bottom of a rocking chair, were perfectly suited for this motion. Even the island's rugged terrain posed less of an obstacle. A tilted statue could navigate slopes and uneven ground more easily than one dragged horizontally. And then there was the cultural dimension. The rhythmic, communal effort of walking the moai mirrored the Rapa Nui's deeply spiritual connection to their ancestors, transforming a logistical challenge into a sacred ritual. Critics, of course, were quick to voice skepticism. Could this method truly scale up to statues weighing 80 tons or more? Wouldn't the risk of toppling be catastrophic? Hunt and Lipo acknowledged these challenges but pointed to clues left behind. Many abandoned moai along ancient roads lie upright, some with broken bases consistent with a fall during transport. Even the island's topography tells a story. Statues found on inclines often face uphill, as if frozen mid-step in their journey. The walking theory forces us to reconsider not just how the moai moved, but how we interpret ancient ingenuity. For too long, modern researchers assumed that primitive cultures relied on brute force solutions. Yet here was evidence of something far more sophisticated, a seamless blend of physics, teamwork, and cultural wisdom. The Rapa Nui didn't just move stones, they brought them to life, one swaying step at a time. And as Hunt and Lipo's experiment shows, sometimes the most revolutionary ideas aren't found in textbooks, they're whispered in the legends of those who came before us. The moment of truth arrived when researchers decided to put the walking theory to the ultimate test, not with calculations or simulations, but with hands-on experimentation. Armed with ropes, replica statues, and a healthy dose of skepticism, teams set out to recreate the ancient technique in real time. The process was meticulously simple yet astonishingly effective. A group of volunteers positioned themselves around a concrete moai replica, gripping thick ropes tied to the statue's head and base. With coordinated pulls, they began rocking the massive figure from side to side, each tilt causing the statue to pivot slightly forward on its curved base. The motion was almost hypnotic, a slow, rhythmic dance between human effort and gravitational physics. And then something extraordinary happened. The statue began to move. Watching the experiment unfold was like witnessing a centuries-old secret come to life. With each controlled sway, the replica inched forward, its base carving a subtle path into the ground. The team discovered that just 15 to 20 people could walk a 5-ton statue nearly 100 yards in under an hour, far more efficient than traditional log rolling methods. Even more striking was how the statue's design played into the motion. The moai's slightly convex base acted like the rocker of a rocking chair, allowing it to tilt smoothly without toppling. This wasn't just guesswork, it was engineering brilliance encoded in stone. but the real revelation came when researchers scaled up their findings. If a small team could maneuver a 5-ton replica with relative ease, could larger groups have moved the island's 80-ton giants the same way? Skeptics argued that the risks would have been immense. A misplaced tug or uneven terrain could send a statue crashing down, shattering months of labor. Yet the experiments revealed a surprising safety net. The walking method allowed for constant adjustments. If the statue leaned too far, teams could counterbalance it instantly by shifting their pulls, a level of control impossible with log rollers. And the evidence on the ground supported this. Many abandoned moai along ancient roads were found upright, as if frozen mid-stride, some with damage suggesting they'd fallen during transport. What made these trials truly groundbreaking wasn't just the physics, it was the cultural resonance. The Rapa Nui oral tradition speaks of the statues moving with mana or spiritual energy. The rhythmic, collective effort of rocking the moai mirrored ceremonial dances or communal rituals, blending practicality with profound symbolism. Transport wasn't just a logistical hurdle, it was a sacred act, a collaboration between the living and the ancestral spirits embodied in the stone. Modern experiments hadn't just uncovered a lost technique, they'd tapped into the heartbeat of an ancient worldview. Yet the debate is far from settled. Some archaeologists point out that the replicas used in experiments were smaller, lighter, and made of uniform concrete, unlike the irregular volcanic tuff of the original moai. Others question whether the method could work on Easter Island's steep, unpredictable slopes. But the walking theory's greatest contribution might be its reminder that history isn't a puzzle with one solution. It's a conversation between past and present, between science and legend. And sometimes the most revolutionary ideas emerge when we're willing to listen to both. Among the earliest European visitors to Easter Island, Dutch explorer Jacob Roggeveen and his crew made landfall on Easter Sunday in 1722, a date that would later give the island its modern name. Their journals paint a vivid picture of the encounter, describing the moai as stony giants standing atop massive stone platforms. But what's conspicuously absent from these accounts? Any mention of the statues being moved, or even evidence of how they might have been transported. Roggeveen's logs detail the island's barren landscape and the Rapa Nui people's astonishment at the Europeans' arrival, yet they're silent on the mechanics behind the moai's placement. This absence raises a haunting question. Had the practice of moving these statues already faded into history by the time outsiders arrived? Decades later, Spanish explorer Felipe González de Ejido mapped the island in 1770, noting the moai's imposing presence but again offering no clues about their transportation. The real enigma, however, lies in the accounts of British explorer James Cook's crew, who visited in 1774. Cook's chronicler, William Wales, observed that many statues appeared toppled or abandoned mid-journey, some face down along ancient roads. He wrote of figures of a monstrous size left in disarray as if their movement had been abruptly halted. While Wales didn't witness the statues in motion, his descriptions of their positions, often upright or leaning, hint at a method far different from horizontal dragging. Then there's the curious case of French navigator Jean-François de Galaup, Comte de la Pérouse, who arrived in 1786. His team's meticulous notes describe the island's quarries and partially carved moai, yet they too found no living memory of how the statues traveled. La Pérouse even speculated that the Rapa Nui people had forgotten the art of their ancestors, a poignant observation suggesting that the knowledge of moai transport might have vanished within generations. These European accounts, while rich in detail, leave us with more questions than answers. If the statues were moved upright, why didn't any outsider record it? One possibility is timing. By the 18th century, the Rapa Nui civilization was in decline, ravaged by internal strife and environmental collapse. The golden age of moai carving and transport might have already passed, leaving only the silent sentinels as clues. Another theory is cultural secrecy. Perhaps the process was so sacred that it wasn't shared with outsiders. Or maybe the Europeans simply didn't recognize what they were seeing. After all, a row of statues swaying upright would have seemed impossible to minds steeped in European engineering traditions. The most tantalizing hint comes not from journals but from the statues themselves. Many toppled moai found along ancient roads have fractured bases, as if they'd fallen forward during transport, a detail that aligns eerily with the walking theory's risks. Others lie face-up, their features worn by centuries of weather, yet their positioning suggests they were never meant to be horizontal. These physical clues, paired with the explorers' fragmented accounts, weave a narrative of loss and interruption. The Europeans may not have seen the Moai walk, but the evidence they left behind abandoned giants frozen in mid-motion, whispers of a method too extraordinary for them to comprehend. What emerges from these historical fragments is a haunting reality. By the time the outside world arrived, Easter Island's greatest marvel might have already become a fading memory. The Moai's journey, whether by walk or roll, had slipped into the realm of legend, leaving us to piece together the truth from scattered clues and the echoes of an island's forgotten pride. At first glance, the idea of an 80-ton stone statue walking across the landscape seems like pure fantasy, something out of a legend rather than a historical reality. But when you break down the physics behind the walking theory, something remarkable happens. The impossible starts to look plausible. The key lies in the Moai's ingenious design. Unlike a flat-bottomed block that would resist movement, these statues were carved with subtly curved bases like the rocker of a rocking chair. This slight convex shape meant that when tilted, the statue's weight would naturally shift forward, allowing it to pivot instead of toppling. It's a perfect marriage of form and function, where every chisel mark served a purpose beyond artistry. To understand how this worked, imagine balancing a heavy book on the palm of your hand. If you tilt your hand slowly, the book's weight shifts and it begins to lean, but with careful adjustments, you can keep it upright while moving it forward. Now replace the book with a multi-ton statue and your hand with teams of rope pullers, and you've got the essence of the walking method. The Moai's center of gravity, positioned just above their rounded bases, acted like a natural pivot point. Tilting the statue side to side created a controlled rocking motion, with each sway edging it forward a few inches at a time. This wasn't brute force, it was precision engineering disguised as rhythm. But the real genius lay in the execution. Researchers replicating the process found that the statue's weight actually helped stabilize them. The heavier the moai, the more resistance it had to sudden shifts, making the rocking motion smoother and less prone to accidents. Teams could adjust their pulls in real time, counteracting any dangerous leans with coordinated tugs, a skill that would have been honed through generations of practice. The curved base also minimized friction, allowing the statue to glide almost effortlessly compared to the grueling drag of log rollers. Yet the method wasn't without risks. A misplaced pull or uneven terrain could send the statue lurching too far, leading to catastrophic falls. Archaeologists have found broken moai along ancient roads, their shattered bases frozen in mid-tumble like snapshots of disaster. But here's the twist: these failures might actually support the walking theory. A statue dragged horizontally would likely crack along its length, but many fallen moai show damage consistent with a forward plunge, exactly what you'd expect from a failed upright march. The walking theory forces us to rethink not just how the moai moved, but how we define primitive technology. This wasn't a clumsy effort, it was a masterclass in leveraging physics, teamwork, and cultural intuition. The Rapa Nui didn't just move mountains, they made them dance. And in that dance, we catch a glimpse of a civilization far more sophisticated than history often gives them credit. While the walking theory offers an elegant explanation for the Moai's journey, not everyone is convinced. Many archaeologists remain deeply skeptical, pointing to glaring holes in the hypothesis that could rewrite or unravel this chapter of history. One major concern, the terrifying margin for error. Imagine the stakes: an 80-ton statue painstakingly carved over months, balanced precariously on its curved base as teams rocket forward. A sudden gust of wind, a misjudged pull, or a hidden rock beneath the soil could send the entire structure crashing down, shattering centuries of cultural heritage in an instant. Critics argue that no society would gamble so recklessly with such irreplaceable monuments, especially when safer alternatives existed. Leading the charge against the walking theory is archaeologist Joanne van Tilburg, director of the Easter Island Statue Project. After decades studying the Moai's transport roads, she contends that horizontal movement on sledges or rollers remains the most plausible method. Her team's analysis of the island's ancient paths reveals worn grooves consistent with dragged objects, not the pivoting motion of upright statues. Even more damning are the abandoned moai found face down along these routes, a position that aligns perfectly with log-based transport accidents, but contradicts the forward-falling pattern predicted by the walking model. If they were moving them upright, Van Tilburg argues, why do we find so many statues fallen flat, not forward? Another sticking point is scale. While experiments with 5-ton replicas proved successful, skeptics question whether the technique could realistically be applied to Easter Island's largest moai. The famous El Gigante, an unfinished colossus still lying in Rano-Raraku Quarry, stretches nearly 70 feet long and weighs an estimated 250 tons, over 40 times heavier than the replicas used in walking demonstrations. At that size, even slight miscalculations in force could generate catastrophic momentum, turning the statue into an unstoppable wrecking ball. Physicists modeling these scenarios estimate that stopping a toppling moai of that scale would require the combined strength of hundreds of people, an impractical safeguard against disaster. Then there's the matter of terrain. Easter Island isn't a flat, obstacle-free plain. Its volcanic landscape is riddled with sudden dips, jagged outcrops, and steep inclines, particularly along the roads connecting quarries to ceremonial platforms. Walking proponents suggest teams could navigate these challenges by choosing optimal paths, but critics highlight statues discovered in near-impossible locations. One moai fragment was found atop a 300-foot hill with a 15-degree slope, a climb that would demand superhuman coordination if attempted upright. "You're telling me they rocked this thing uphill like some stone pendulum?" scoffs geologist Claudio Cristino. Occam's razor says they dragged it. Perhaps the most visceral counterargument comes from the statues themselves. Close examination of fallen moai reveals damage patterns that tell conflicting stories. While some fractures align with the walking theory's forward fall prediction, others show horizontal stress marks, the kind caused by being pulled or tipped sideways, not rocked. Even more puzzling are the statues found buried upright in soil, their bases perfectly preserved. If they'd been walked into position, why would their transport wear be hidden underground? The debate exposes a deeper rift in how we reconstruct the past. Walking theory champions accuse skeptics of underestimating ancient innovation, while traditionalists fire back that romanticizing lost secrets ignores Occam's simplest solution. Both sides agree on one thing: until someone moves an 80-ton moai the full distance using either method, the mystery remains frozen in time, much like the island's silent giants. The mystery of how the moai moved invites us to look beyond Easter Island to the megaliths of other ancient cultures who faced the same colossal challenge. Take the Egyptians, masters of stone who built the pyramids with blocks weighing up to 80 tons, rivaling the heaviest moai. Their method, a combination of sledges, lubricated pathways, and sheer manpower. Paintings from the tomb of Jehutyhotep depict a massive statue being dragged on a wooden sledge by hundreds of workers, while someone pours water ahead to reduce friction. It's a stark contrast to the walking theory: no rocking, no upright motion, just brute force amplified by clever engineering. But here's the twist: Egypt had something Easter Island lacked: abundant resources. The Nile's fertile banks provided timber for sledges and ropes, while the flat desert terrain made dragging feasible. Easter Island's isolation and deforestation forced the Rapa Nui to innovate with what little they had. Then there's the Inca, who built Machu Picchu high in the Andes, fitting multi-ton stones together so precisely you couldn't slip a blade between them. Unlike the Moai, these stones weren't moved far. Quarries were often on-site, but the Inca had to navigate steep mountain slopes. Their solution: ramp systems, ropes, and possibly log rollers, though some argue they used a technique akin to keystone dragging, where stones were pivoted step by step. Sound familiar? The Inca, like the Rapa Nui, relied on communal labor and rhythmic coordination, suggesting that even across continents, ancient cultures converged on similar ideas when faced with gravity's challenge. Half a world away, the builders of Stonehenge left fewer clues. The blue stones, some weighing 4 tons, traveled over 150 miles from Wales, a feat that still baffles archaeologists. Theories range from sledges on greased timber tracks to boats along rivers, but recent experiments hint at another possibility. The stones might have been walked upright using a cradle-like frame, rocked forward like a modern fridge move. It's eerie how this mirrors the Moai's proposed method, as if separated cultures stumbled upon the same physics hack. Yet none of these examples quite match the Moai's uniqueness. The Egyptians had rivers and armies of laborers. The Inca had llamas and terraced landscapes. Even Stonehenge's blue stones were a fraction of the Moai's weight. What sets Easter Island apart is the audacity of its vision: to carve nearly 1,000 giants, then maneuver them across an island with no beasts of burden, no wheels, and dwindling resources. Other cultures moved stones. The Rapa Nui may have made them dance. The deeper we dig, the clearer it becomes. There's no universal blueprint for megaliths. Each culture hacked the problem with the tools, terrain, and traditions at hand. The Moai don't just challenge us to solve a puzzle. They remind us that human ingenuity wears countless faces, each as brilliant as the next. Long before archaeologists arrived with their measuring tapes and theories, the Rapa Nui people passed down stories of the Moai that blurred the line between memory and myth. One particularly striking legend speaks of a powerful chief named Toko Aihu, who possessed the ability to command the statues to walk. According to oral tradition, he would chant sacred words, imbuing the stone giants with mana, spiritual energy, until they stirred to life, rocking forward with a rhythmic creak as they marched to their appointed places. To modern ears, this sounds like pure folklore, but what if these tales hold a kernel of historical truth? The Rapa Nui's oral histories are far more than whimsical fables. Their meticulous records, encoded with clues about their ancestors' worldview and methods. Take the term nik, which translates roughly to moving without lifting. Elders used this phrase to describe how the Moai traveled, emphasizing a motion that involved neither dragging nor carrying. When anthropologists first recorded these accounts in the 19th century, they dismissed them as symbolic, until the walking theory emerged centuries later, mirroring the exact motion described. Suddenly, nik didn't seem so metaphorical after all. Another thread in these oral traditions involves the concept of uhu, a ceremonial chant performed during Moai transport. The rhythm of uhu was said to synchronize the labor of workers, creating a steady cadence for pulling ropes. This detail aligns eerily with experiments showing that coordinated rocking requires precise timing. Without a shared rhythm, the statue could destabilize. The chants, then, might have been as practical as they were spiritual, a metronome for the dance between human and stone. Yet not all oral accounts fit neatly into the walking theory. Some legends describe the Moai flying to their platforms, guided by sorcerers who harnessed supernatural forces. Skeptics argue these variants undermine the walking hypothesis, proving the stories are purely allegorical. But anthropologist Sergio Rapu, a Rapa Nui descendant and former governor of the island, offers a different interpretation. Flying could simply mean moving effortlessly, he suggests. When you see a statue rocking smoothly, it does look like it's gliding. Perhaps the most compelling evidence lies in the stories of failure. Oral histories recount moai that stumbled or refused to move, often attributing these mishaps to broken taboos or lost mana. Intriguingly, these tales often specify that the statues fell forward, shattering their faces, a detail corroborated by archaeologists who have found toppled moai with precisely that damage pattern. It's as if the legends preserved not just the method but its risks. The tension between these accounts and Western archaeology reveals a deeper clash of perspectives. For generations, scholars treated oral traditions as secondary to physical evidence, assuming written records were inherently more reliable. But the Rapa Nui stories challenge that hierarchy. They suggest a civilization that documented its achievements not on parchment, but in the cadence of chants and the warnings of elders. The walking theory, then, isn't just about solving an engineering puzzle, it's about learning to listen. The statues themselves hold silent testimony to their journeys, not in words but in scars. Scrutinizing the wear patterns on the moai's bases and sides reveals a forensic record of how they might have traveled. The most telling clues lie in the statues abandoned along ancient roads, their surfaces etched with marks that whisper of their final moments in motion. Those with rounded bases, for instance, often show concentrated abrasion on the front and back edges, exactly where you'd expect contact if they'd been rocked forward repeatedly. These grooves, polished smooth by friction, mirror the wear found on the underside of rocking chairs after years of use. It's as if the stone itself remembers the rhythm of its journey. But contrast that with the moai discovered face down in the dirt. Many of these fallen giants exhibit long, parallel scratches along their sides, as if dragged across abrasive terrain. Some even bear deep gouges consistent with the bite of wooden sledges or log rollers. The dichotomy is striking: upright statues with worn bases versus horizontal ones with scarred flanks. This physical evidence suggests a transportation history far more complex than any single method. Perhaps the Rapa Nui employed different techniques depending on the statue's size, the distance to its destination, or even the era of its creation. Then there's the enigma of the road warriors, moai found upright but partially buried in soil along transport routes. Excavations reveal that their bases, once thought to be flat, actually curved downward into the earth like tree roots. This could indicate they were walked into position, their rocking motion gradually sinking them into soft ground with each forward tilt. Soil compaction studies around these statues show layers of sediment pressed in wave-like patterns, as if the earth itself recorded each swaying step. Critics counter that erosion could explain some of these features. Wind and rain have lashed Easter Island for centuries, potentially smoothing surfaces that were once rougher. But geologists have identified a crucial distinction. Natural erosion tends to wear surfaces uniformly, while the statue's distinct abrasion patterns align precisely with points of mechanical stress. The most compelling evidence comes from unfinished moai still embedded in Rano Raraku's quarry walls. Their untouched bases, protected from centuries of weathering, show the original craftsmanship. Many were carved with intentional convex curves, a design choice that would make little sense if dragging was the sole transport method. Damage patterns tell a story of trial and error, too. Several toppled moai have fractured bases with clean breaks along the front edge, as if they'd tipped too far during rocking and snapped under their own weight. Others display crushed damage on their noses, an injury hard to explain unless they'd fallen face first, a scenario almost impossible in horizontal transport. These failures may hold the most valuable clues, preserving moments when the method faltered, freezing time like a prehistoric accident scene. The moai's scars aren't just blemishes, they're a language. When we decode their wear patterns, we're not just studying rocks, we're reading the footsteps of a civilization that turned engineering into art and movement into ceremony. Every groove, every fracture, every polished edge is a word in a story we're only beginning to understand. Ropes were the unsung heroes of the Moai's journey, simple yet revolutionary tools that turned back-breaking labor into a symphony of motion. Picture teams of Rapa Nui workers, their hands wrapped around thick cords made from the island's hardy hau-hau or mahute plants, fibers strong enough to bear tons of shifting stone. These weren't just tug-of-war ropes, they were precision instruments, each pull calculated to tilt the statue just enough to pivot its weight forward without losing balance. The trick lay in coordination. Unlike dragging, which relies on constant force, walking the moai required rhythmic pulses, a collective heave to one side, a pause, then a mirror pull to the opposite side, like rowers keeping time in a boat. Modern experiments reveal the delicate physics at play. Teams positioned at 3 key points, one group at the statue's head, another at its base, and spotters along the sides created a triangulation of control. The head ropes provided the primary rocking force, while the base ropes acted as brakes, preventing over-rotation. Spotters kept the statue's sway within a safe arc, shouting adjustments like crewmates navigating rough seas. This wasn't brute strength, it was a dance of leverage. Tilting the moai just 15 degrees forward shifted its center of gravity enough to make the base pivot, but not so far that it risked toppling. With each controlled rock, the statue would step forward 6 to 8 inches, inching across the landscape at a pace of roughly 100 feet per hour. The real marvel, how little force it actually took. Calculations show that moving a 10-ton replica required just 500 pounds of sustained pull, about the combined strength of 15 people. For larger statues, teams could scale up with multiple ropes distributing the load. But the genius was in the ergonomics. Unlike log rolling, which demanded constant stooping and lifting, rope teams worked upright, using their body weight to supplement arm strength. The motion became almost meditative, a steady cadence reinforced by chants or drum beats. Archaeologists have even found worn grooves along ancient roads that match the predicted path of a statue's rocking base, as if the earth itself remembers their rhythm. Yet this method demanded more than muscle, it required trust. A single panicked pull could send the moai careening. Oral histories hint at how crews mitigated risk. Apprentices trained with smaller stones, learning to feel the statue's balance through the ropes. Some legends speak of master movers who could sense instability through vibrations in the cords, like anglers reading a fish on the line, and when disaster struck, the damage was telling. Broken ropes left frayed marks on statue sides, while failed maneuvers often left moai nose down in the soil, their shattered bases preserving the moment momentum overcame control. What emerges isn't just a technique but a philosophy. The Rapa Nui didn't conquer the moai's weight, they collaborated with it, turning physics into ritual. Every rope burn, every calloused palm, every shouted correction was a dialogue between human and stone, a reminder that some mysteries aren't solved by force but by harmony. Easter Island's landscape tells a story of radical transformation, one that holds vital clues to the Moai mystery. When Polynesian settlers first arrived around 1200 years ago, they found a lush paradise blanketed in towering palm forests. These trees, some reaching heights of 80 feet with trunks thick enough to hug, were more than just scenery. They were the backbone of survival, providing wood for homes, canoes, and tools. But by the time European explorers arrived in the 18th century, the island was a shadow of its former self, a windswept grassland dotted with statues, its forests reduced to stunted shrubs. This dramatic deforestation wasn't just an ecological crisis. It may have been the catalyst that forced the Rapa Nui to reinvent how they moved their stone giants. The traditional log rolling method, so often cited in theories about the Moai's transport, demands an enormous amount of timber. To move an 80-ton statue just 1 mile, researchers estimate it would take hundreds of logs, not just as rollers beneath the statue, but as a continuous track laid down ahead of it. Each log could only be used once, as the weight of the moai would crush them into the soil. Multiply that by 900 statues, some traveling over 10 miles from quarry to coast, and the numbers become staggering. Where would that much wood come from on an island barely 15 miles long? Pollen samples from ancient lake beds reveal the grim answer. The palm forests had already begun vanishing by the 1400s, centuries before Europeans arrived. The Rapa Nui weren't just running out of trees, they were racing against time. This scarcity may explain the walking theory's sudden appeal. Unlike log rolling, which devours timber, moving the moai upright requires just a few sturdy ropes likely woven from the island's remaining shrubs. Hau and mahute plants, though smaller than the vanished palms, produced fibers strong enough to handle the strain. Suddenly, the statue's curved bases make strategic sense. They minimize friction, eliminating the need for lubricated tracks or replacement logs. Even the island's rugged terrain becomes an asset rather than an obstacle. Tilted upright, a moai could pivot around boulders or step over uneven ground, while a horizontal drag would demand cleared pathways. The walking method wasn't just innovative, it was born of necessity, a brilliant adaptation to environmental collapse. Yet the relationship between the moai and deforestation isn't one way. Some researchers propose that statue transport itself accelerated the island's ecological crisis. The constant demand for timber, whether for sledges, rollers, or levers, could have pushed the forests past their tipping point. Others argue that the real culprit was the introduced Polynesian rat, which gnawed palm seeds before they could sprout. Either way, the Rapa Nui found themselves trapped in a paradox. Their most famous achievements may have hastened the loss of the very resources that made them possible. The walking theory offers a haunting glimpse of resilience in the face of scarcity. If true, it means the islanders didn't just give up when the trees vanished, they reimagined the impossible. Their solution speaks to a universal human truth: necessity doesn't just breed invention, it forges legends. Modern technology has given us a virtual time machine, allowing scientists to test the walking theory without risking a single ancient statue. Using advanced computer simulations, researchers can recreate Easter Island's terrain, experiment with different rope configurations, and even factor in variables like wind speed or human fatigue, all with the click of a button. One groundbreaking study from 2018 employed three-dimensional modeling software typically used in engineering and animation to simulate how an 80-ton moai might respond to rhythmic rocking. The virtual statue was programmed with precise weight distribution, base curvature, and friction coefficients based on scans of real moai. When researchers inputted the proposed walking motion, the results were startling. The model showed that with just the right tilt around 15 degrees, the statue could indeed step forward without toppling, its curved base acting like a natural pivot. But simulations reveal nuances that physical experiments might miss. For instance, virtual recreations showed how slight adjustments in rope placement drastically altered stability. Pulling too high on the statue's head caused it to overbalance, while anchoring ropes too low made the motion sluggish. The models also highlighted the critical role of teamwork. Even a half-second delay in one team's pull could send the entire system spiraling into chaos. These findings mirrored Rapa Nui oral traditions emphasizing rhythmic chants and synchronized labor, suggesting their methods were honed through generations of trial and error. Some of the most compelling insights come from combining old and new evidence. Archaeologists fed data from damaged moai-like fractures on forward fallen statues into impact simulations. The virtual collisions matched the real-world damage patterns almost perfectly, reinforcing the idea that many toppled mid-transport while upright. Other models explored alternative theories like log rolling, but consistently flagged impracticalities. dragging an 80-ton moai horizontally required unrealistic amounts of timber and manpower, especially on the island's uneven slopes. Yet simulations aren't infallible. Critics point out that no digital model can fully capture the unpredictability of human judgment or the quirks of volcanic terrain. A team at Stanford countered this by introducing fuzzy variables into their simulations, randomized elements like sudden rain or a distracted worker. Even with these wildcards, the walking method held up more reliably than log-based alternatives. The takeaway: technology hasn't just tested a theory, it's given us a glimpse into the minds of the Rapa Nui, revealing a sophistication we're only beginning to measure. While the walking theory has captured imaginations, it's far from the only radical idea about how the Moai traveled. Some researchers propose an even more audacious method. What if the statues didn't traverse land at all, but instead glided across water? The floating theory suggests that the Rapa Nui used massive barges or rafts to ferry the Moai around the island's coastline, bypassing the rugged interior entirely. Proponents point to the island's network of coastal ahu, many positioned just steps from the shore. With the right vessel, transporting an 80-ton statue by sea might have been smoother than hauling it over miles of uneven terrain. Archaeologists have tested this idea with replicas, lashing smaller stone moai to traditional Polynesian outrigger canoes. The results were surprising. Even modest rafts could support significant weight when balanced correctly. But scaling up to full-size statues introduces daunting challenges. Easter Island's waters are notorious for sudden swells and strong currents, making barge navigation perilous. A single rogue wave could send a precious moai and its crew plummeting to the ocean floor, and while some coastal roads show signs of statue transport, others lead inland where floating would be impossible. The theory also doesn't explain the upright wear patterns found on many moai bases, which align more clearly with land-based movement. Then there's the most enigmatic idea of all: levitation. Yes, you heard that right. A handful of fringe researchers and ancient astronaut theorists suggest the Rapa Nui might have harnessed lost technologies or even supernatural forces to make the statues defy gravity. These claims often cite vague similarities to other global megalithic sites, from Stonehenge to the pyramids, where myths speak of stones moved by sound or mystical energy. On Easter Island, legends tell of the god Makemake granting priests the power to command stones with chants. Could these stories hint at some forgotten acoustic technique? Mainstream archaeologists dismiss levitation as pure fantasy, but the persistence of such myths across cultures is intriguing. Similar tales crop up in the Andes, where Inca legends describe stones softened by herbal concoctions, and in Egypt, where texts mention words of power that made obelisks light as reeds. While there's zero scientific evidence for such methods, the universality of these stories raises a tantalizing question. Why do so many ancient peoples insist their ancestors moved mountains not just with muscle but with magic? Perhaps the answer lies in the limits of our own imagination. To modern minds, the idea of 80-ton statues walking or floating seems absurd until experiments prove it plausible. The levitation myths, however far-fetched, remind us that every impossibility is just a mystery waiting to be solved. Whether by ropes, rafts, or some method we've yet to uncover, the Moai's journey remains one of humanity's most captivating riddles. To the Rapa Nui people, the Moai were far more than stone monuments. They were vessels of ancestral power, physical embodiments of spirits watching over the living. This sacred connection may explain why they didn't just move the statues, but orchestrated their journeys with what appears to be ceremonial precision. Imagine the scene: teams of workers chanting in unison, ropes taut with rhythmic pulls, the giant figures swaying as if animated by invisible hands. This wasn't mere logistics, it was a ritual where every tilt and pivot blurred the line between transport and transcendence. Central to this practice was the concept of mana, a spiritual energy believed to flow through chiefs, priests, and the natural world. Legends suggest that the statues themselves possessed mana, and the act of moving them wasn't just physical labor, it was an act of communion. Oral histories describe ceremonies where priests fed the moai with sacred offerings, strengthening their power before the journey. The rocking motion, then, might have mirrored the pulse of life, a symbolic reenactment of ancestors walking alongside their descendants. Even the statue's placement wasn't arbitrary. Positioned on ahu platforms facing inward, they formed a protective ring around villages, their gazes channeling mana toward the living like a spiritual lighthouse. The walking method's communal nature also reflects Rapa Nui values. Unlike log rolling, which could be delegated to small teams, rocking a moai upright required synchronized effort, dozens of people moving as one, their success dependent on trust and shared rhythm. This collective action mirrored the island's social fabric, where survival hinged on cooperation. Some scholars argue the statue's transport doubled as a rite of passage, teaching younger generations about unity and reverence. Broken moai along roadsides might not just mark accidents, they could symbolize the cost of discord, stone lessons in what happened when harmony failed. Contrast this with the isolation of Easter Island itself, a speck of land thousands of miles from the nearest shore. In such a world, the moai's journeys weren't just feats of engineering. They were acts of defiance against impossibility, a declaration that even in solitude, humanity could conquer weight and distance through belief and ingenuity. When a statue finally reached its ahu, it wasn't just placed, it was awakened, its eyes ceremonially carved to see the community it guarded. The walk, then, was the moment the stone became sacred, a transformation as profound as the movement itself. Perhaps this is why the walking theory resonates beyond archaeology. It's not just about how the statues moved, but why they moved that way. The Rapa Nui could have dragged their giants in silence. Instead, they chose a method that turned labor into liturgy, proving that even the heaviest burdens can become sacred when carried together. Attempting to recreate the moai's legendary walk today isn't just a logistical challenge, it's a high-stakes tightrope act between archaeology and safety regulations. Modern experiments, while groundbreaking, operate under constraints the Rapa Nui never faced. Imagine coordinating a team to rock an 80-ton replica without the cultural knowledge passed down through generations. The original movers likely trained from childhood, learning the subtle rhythms and rope techniques that turned danger into routine. Today's researchers, no matter how skilled, are essentially reinventing a lost art from scratch. Every tilt risks not just a statue's destruction, but lawsuits and liability, a far cry from the communal risk-sharing of ancient times, another hurdle. The sheer scarcity of artisans who still work with traditional materials. Rapa Nui rope makers once crafted cords from native plants like hau-hau, weaving fibers that balanced strength with flexibility. Modern replicas often use synthetic ropes for consistency, but these lack the organic give that might have been key to the statue's controlled sway. Even finding suitable stone is a challenge. Original moai were carved from compressed volcanic ash called tuff, a relatively lightweight material compared to granite or concrete. Today's replicas, often made from denser stone for durability, behave differently under stress, skewing test results. Perhaps the most overlooked factor is terrain. Easter Island's ancient transport roads were carefully prepared pathways, smoothed by centuries of use. Modern recreations often take place on flat, manicured surfaces for safety, stripping away the very irregularities that might have forced the Rapa Nui to refine their technique. Archaeologist Carl Lipo notes that even slight inclines dramatically alter a statue's balance, something only apparent when testing on natural landscapes. Yet permitting such experiments in fragile heritage sites is nearly impossible, leaving researchers to extrapolate from controlled environments. Then there's the human element. Moving a moai wasn't just physics, it was psychology. Oral histories described chants and rituals that synchronized labor, forging a collective focus no modern workplace can replicate. Safety protocols now mandate brakes, helmets, and backup plans, disrupting the rhythmic flow essential to the walking method. One failed experiment in 2018 saw a replica topple despite computerized force calculations, proving that algorithms can't yet replace the intuitive teamwork of trained crews. These challenges don't just highlight gaps in our understanding, they underscore the brilliance of the original achievers. The Rapa Nui didn't have safety nets or synthetic ropes. What they had was something far more powerful: generations of accumulated wisdom, a culture steeped in shared purpose, and the audacity to turn myth into reality, one swaying step at a time. Easter Island's ancient roads snake across the landscape like faded scars, their surfaces worn smooth by centuries of forgotten footsteps. These paths, some stretching over 10 miles from Rono-Roroku Quarry to coastal Ahu, hold silent clues to the Moai's mysterious journeys. But walk these routes today, and you'll notice something peculiar: many are barely wider than the statues themselves, flanked by raised embankments that resemble troughs more than thoroughfares. If the Rapa Nui relied on log rolling to transport their giants, where are the parallel ruts left by heavy sledges? Where are the flattened corridors wide enough to accommodate teams of laborers and rolling timber? The absence of these telltale marks has led researchers to question everything we thought we knew. Archaeologists mapping these roads have uncovered something even more intriguing: intermittent pits and grooves spaced at regular intervals, almost like footprints frozen in stone. These depressions, often found in pairs, align eerily with the proposed rocking motion of the walking method. Imagine a statue tilted forward, its base pivoting into the soil before rocking back, each step leaving behind a subtle indentation. Soil analysis along these paths reveals compacted layers consistent with repeated vertical pressure, not the horizontal drag marks expected from log-based transport. Even more compelling are the road's gentle curves. Unlike straight tracks ideal for sledges, these routes meander around obstacles, following contours that would have been easier to navigate with an upright, pivoting statue than a bulky horizontal load. Then there's the mystery of the abandoned moai. Dozens of statues lie toppled along these roads, many in poses that defy simple explanation. Some are planted upright in the earth, their bases buried as if they'd been walked into position before being left midway. Others lean at precarious angles, frozen in mid-tilt. One particularly revealing specimen, nicknamed the Fallen Giant, lies face first with its base shattered. The kind of damage you'd expect from a catastrophic forward plunge, not a sideways collapse. Nearby, the ground shows deep scuff marks radiating outward, as if teams had desperately tried to arrest its fall. These aren't just random accidents, they're snapshots of a method in action, moments where the delicate dance between human and stone faltered. Critics counter that some roads do show signs of horizontal wear, particularly the famed Road of the Giants near Rono-Roroku. Here, parallel grooves run along the path, suggesting something heavy was dragged. But even this evidence isn't conclusive. Experimental archaeology has shown that ropes used in the walking method can also leave similar marks when they occasionally graze the ground during tilts. The truth may lie in a hybrid approach. Perhaps the Rapa Nui used different methods for different terrains, walking statues across flat stretches but resorting to dragging for steep inclines where balance was riskier. The roads also hint at a cultural dimension often overlooked. Many pathways align with celestial events, connecting quarries to Ahu, positioned for solstice sunrises or lunar standstills. This sacred geography suggests the act of moving a moai wasn't just a physical journey, it was a pilgrimage, each step imbued with cosmic significance. The very earth beneath these statues may have been consecrated, turning their transport into a ritual as much as a feat of engineering. When you walk these paths today, you're not just tracing the footsteps of laborers. You're retracing a procession of spirits, stone and stars, a dance frozen in time. The secret to the Moai's potential walk might lie in their carefully engineered posture, an architectural marvel hidden in plain sight. Unlike most statues that stand perfectly upright, these giants lean forward slightly, their centers of gravity deliberately positioned just over their rounded bases. This subtle tilt wasn't a mistake, it was the key to their mobility. Picture a bowling ball placed on a shallow dish. It won't stay still but will naturally rock with the slightest nudge. The Moai's design follows the same principle. Their forward cant shifts their weight toward the front edge of their curved undersides, creating a pivot point that transforms their mass from a burden into a tool. Examine the statue's profiles closely, and you'll spot another clever trick: their elongated torsos and oversized heads. These proportions aren't just artistic choices, they're physics hacks. The bulk of a Moai's weight sits high above its base, like a pendulum suspended from a pivot. When rocked, this top-heavy design generates momentum, allowing the statue to swing forward with surprising ease. Experiments show that tilting a replica Moai beyond 10 degrees triggers a gravitational domino effect. The upper body's weight pulls the base into motion, almost as if the statue is helping to move itself. Then there's the matter of the bases themselves. While early archaeologists assumed they were flat, laser scans reveal most were carved with a subtle convex curve, like the underside of a rocking chair. This curvature minimizes contact with the ground, reducing friction that would resist movement. But here's the genius: the curve isn't uniform. Many bases are slightly flatter at the front and back edges, precisely where the statue would make contact during rocking. This wear pattern suggests the design evolved through trial and error, with craftsmen refining the shape over generations to optimize motion. The Moai's tilted posture also solved a critical safety concern. A perfectly vertical statue would be unstable when rocked, prone to toppling sideways, but the forward lean created a natural fall zone, directed ahead where crews wanted the statue to go. If a tilt went too far, the Moai would pitch forward onto its face, a disaster but one that might leave the statue repairable. Sideways falls, common with log rolling, often shattered statues beyond recovery. The design essentially built in a fail-safe, turning the greatest risk, gravity, into a controlled ally. Modern engineers have tested these features using 3D modeling, inputting the exact dimensions and weight distribution of real Moai. The simulations confirm what the Rapa Nui likely knew by instinct: these statues are exquisitely balanced for motion. Adjust the angle of the lean by just a few degrees and the model becomes unstable. Change the curvature of the base and friction spikes. Every element works in concert, a symphony of stone and equilibrium perfected over centuries. This wasn't just functional design, it was spiritual geometry. The forward lean also ensured the statue's gazes angled slightly downward as they reached their platforms, their eyes meeting those of the living rather than staring blankly at the horizon. Even in stillness, the Moai embodied motion, their poised tilt a frozen moment in an ancient dance between earth and sky. The Rapa Nui didn't just carve statues, they engineered gravity itself. Not every attempt to make the Moai walk has ended in triumph. In 2014, a team of Japanese researchers learned this lesson the hard way when their carefully constructed replica, a 4-ton concrete Moai, slipped from its ropes during a public demonstration. The statue teetered for a heart-stopping moment before crashing face first into the ground, its nose shearing off on impact. The failure wasn't just embarrassing, it was revealing. Forensic analysis showed the statue had been tilted just 2 degrees beyond the safe threshold, proving how razor-thin the margin for error truly was. Similar disasters have punctuated the history of Moai replication. During a 2018 experiment in California, engineers attempting to scale up the walking method with a 15-ton basalt replica underestimated the effect of uneven terrain. As the statue rocked forward over a slight dip in the ground, one team of pullers lost tension for a fraction of a second. That momentary lapse sent the replica lurching sideways where its own momentum became unstoppable. The impact crater left in the soil matched the dimensions of fallen moai found along Easter Island's ancient roads, uncanny validation that modern failures mirror ancient ones. The most dramatic collapse occurred in Chile in 2016, where a 9-ton granite moai replica toppled onto its crew during a documentary shoot. Unlike volcanic tuff, granite lacks the slight elasticity of Easter Island's native stone, making it far more brittle when stressed. As the statue pitched forward, its base snapped cleanly along a mineral vein, sending 5,000 pounds of rock cartwheeling toward the cameramen. Miraculously, no one was seriously injured, but the incident exposed a critical variable: material matters. The Rapa Nui's choice of compressed volcanic ash wasn't arbitrary. Its microscopic air pockets absorb shock better than dense stones, acting like a natural suspension system during transport. These failures aren't just cautionary tales, they're archaeological breadcrumbs. Each shattered replica leaves behind fracture patterns that researchers compare to damaged moai on Easter Island. The consistency is striking. Modern replicas that fall forward while upright show clean breaks at the base and crushed facial features, precisely the damage seen on ancient statues like Moai Hava, which lies nose down near Rono Raraku with its base sheared at a 15-degree angle. Sideways collapses, more common in log rolling experiments, leave entirely different marks: lateral stress fractures and flaked-off shoulders. What emerges from these wrecked experiments isn't proof that the walking method doesn't work, but rather how extraordinarily precise its execution had to be. The Rapa Nui movers weren't just strong, they were masters of timing and intuition, reading subtle vibrations through ropes like sailors sense shifts in the wind. Their success rate, evidenced by hundreds of intact standing moai, suggests a level of skill modern crews are still struggling to replicate. Every fallen statue, ancient or modern, whispers the same warning: these stone giants don't yield to force. They cooperate only with understanding. The walking theory has ignited a firestorm of debate, splitting opinions between fascinated public audiences and cautious academics. When video footage of rocking moai replicas first hit mainstream media, the response was electric. Documentaries and news segments latched onto the idea, dubbing it the statue walk phenomenon, complete with dramatic slow-motion shots of concrete giants swaying like drunken dancers. Social media amplified the spectacle, turning the Rapa Nui into viral stars. Comment sections flooded with awestruck emojis and taglines like "Ancient tech blows minds." For the general public, the theory offered something rare, an archaeological mystery served with cinematic flair. The sheer visual absurdity of multi-ton stones shuffling upright made it irresistible clickbait, blurring the line between science and spectacle. But academia's reception has been far more measured. While some archaeologists like Terry Hunt and Carl Lipo champion the theory as a paradigm shift, others greet it with raised eyebrows. Peer-reviewed journals have published both scathing critiques and cautious endorsements, revealing a field deeply divided. Traditionalists argue the evidence remains circumstantial, where patterns on statues could stem from erosion or post-placement adjustments, not just transport. Others point out that no contemporary accounts or artifacts definitively depict the walking method. "Where are the ropes?" demands Dr. Susan Hayes, a Pacific archaeology specialist. If this was their primary technique, why haven't we found remnants of the very tools that made it possible? The media's love affair with the theory has also drawn criticism for oversimplification. Headlines often reduce centuries of Rapa Nui culture to a single eureka moment, glossing over the nuances. A 2019 National Geographic cover story, for instance, was accused of sensationalism after depicting a CGI moai mid-stride like a stone Frankenstein, a far cry from the incremental, controlled motion proposed by researchers. This gap between scholarly caution and public enthusiasm has created tension. with some academics dismissing the walking theory as pop archaeology, fueled by charismatic storytelling rather than hard data. Yet the theory's cultural impact can't be ignored. Indigenous Rapa Nui scholars like Elder Sergio Rapu have embraced elements of it as validation of oral traditions long dismissed as myth. Our ancestors always said the Moai walked, Rapu notes in interviews. Science is just catching up to what we've known. This reclamation of narrative has resonated deeply, turning the debate into more than academic squabbling. It's become a touchstone for discussions about whose knowledge counts in reconstructing history. Even skeptics admit the theory has done invaluable work by challenging assumptions. Before the walking hypothesis, Moai transport was often framed as a solved problem, with log rolling accepted as gospel. Now, textbooks include caveats, and student archaeologists are encouraged to question entrenched ideas. The theory's greatest legacy might be its disruption of academic complacency, proving that even the most settled mysteries can still surprise us. Whether it ultimately stands or falls, the walking debate has reminded both scholars and the public that history is never set in stone. Modern technology is peeling back layers of Easter Island's secrets like never before. Tools like LiDAR, light detection and ranging, are revolutionizing archaeology by revealing hidden landscapes beneath dense vegetation and soil. When researchers scanned the island's ancient roads with airborne LiDAR, they uncovered subtle depressions and alignments invisible to the naked eye. These ghostly tracks, some running parallel to known paths, suggest a network of transport routes more intricate than previously imagined. Even more tantalizing are the faint, evenly spaced pits along these routes, potential footprints left by statues rocking forward in their upright journeys. Unlike traditional excavations that disturb delicate sites, LiDAR lets us see the past without lifting a shovel, preserving clues that might otherwise crumble to dust. Ground-penetrating radar takes the investigation deeper, literally. By sending electromagnetic pulses into the earth, archaeologists can map subsurface features without digging. Recent surveys around Raraku Quarry revealed buried statues with bases still intact, some showing the telltale convex curves of the walking theory. Others lie at odd angles, as if frozen mid-fall during transport attempts. These buried giants are time capsules, their positions and wear patterns offering snapshots of ancient engineering in action. One striking discovery, a cluster of Moai bases found tilted at 15-degree angles, the exact pivot point needed for the rocking motion. It's as if the ground itself recorded their final, faltering steps. But the real game-changer might be 3D modeling. By creating digital twins of Moai using photogrammetry, researchers can simulate countless transport scenarios in minutes. Adjust the statue's weight distribution, change the rope angles, or add a sudden gust of wind. The software calculates the outcomes with precision. These virtual experiments have identified a critical threshold. Statues with bases curved beyond a specific radius become unstable, prone to overbalancing. Intriguingly, most real Moai fall just below this limit, their designs fine-tuned through generations of trial and error. Yet technology has its limits. LiDAR can't distinguish between a statue's rocking groove and a natural erosion pattern. Radar struggles with the island's volcanic soil, which scatters signals unpredictably. And no simulation can capture the human element, the chance, the teamwork, the intuitive corrections that might have made all the difference. Some researchers argue that these tools, while powerful, risk reducing the Moai's mystery to mere data points, stripping away the cultural context that breathed life into the stone. The most exciting breakthroughs often come when old and new collide. In 2021, a team combined LiDAR maps with Rapa Nui oral histories, overlaying digital terrain with legends of sacred pathways. The result, a near-perfect match between high-tech scans and ancestral stories. Modern tools aren't just answering questions, they're helping us ask better ones, bridging the gap between science and tradition. Every pixel, every radar echo, every virtual tilt brings us closer to hearing the Moai's whispers across the centuries. The Moai Statues Walk doesn't just rewrite Easter Island's history, it sends ripples across the globe, challenging how we interpret every ancient megalithic wonder. Consider Stonehenge's towering sarsen stones, each weighing up to 30 tons. For centuries, archaeologists assumed they were dragged across southern England on sledges. But what if the builders employed a technique similar to the Rapa Nui, rocking the stones upright along a carefully prepared route? The same principle could explain how Japan's massive Moai-like statues, the dogu, were transported across rugged terrain, or how Peru's Inca moved their precisely fitted polygonal blocks without wheels. The walking theory forces us to reconsider a universal truth. Ancient cultures might have shared a hidden vocabulary of motion, using gravity as their invisible collaborator. Take Egypt's obelisks, some towering over 100 feet tall. Traditional narratives depict them being hauled horizontally on sledges, much like the discredited log rolling theory for the Moai. Yet hieroglyphs at Aswan's quarries show workers levering obelisks upward, not dragging them flat. Could the Egyptians have walked these slender giants too? Experiments with scale models reveal that tilting an obelisk's base creates a pivot point, allowing controlled rocking similar to the Moai method. The key difference: precision. Where the Rapa Nui relied on communal rhythm, Egyptian engineers might have used counterweights and pivots, adapting the concept to their monumental scale. Then there's the puzzle of Cambodia's Angkor Wat. How did laborers transport 5 million pound sandstone blocks from quarries 25 miles away without leaving clear road evidence? The walking theory offers a provocative alternative: floating. While water transport isn't new to archaeology, combining it with upright movement could explain why so few drag marks exist. Imagine barges loaded with stones kept vertical, their weight distributed to prevent capsizing, a technique that might have left fewer traces than sledges. This hybrid approach echoes Easter Island's own possible mix of land and sea methods, suggesting ancient builders weren't limited to one solution but adapted fluidly to their environments. Even more radical is the implication for sites like Puma Punku in Bolivia, where precisely cut 100-ton blocks seem to defy logical transport methods. Mainstream theories propose ramps and ropes, but what if the builders employed a variation of the walking technique, using the stone's own geometry to step them into place? The andesite blocks there have recessed handles and knobs that could have anchored ropes for controlled tilting, features eerily reminiscent of the wear patterns on Moai bases. The walking theory's greatest gift might be its humility. For too long, modern scholars assumed ancient peoples relied on brute force solutions, projecting our industrial mindset onto their world. But the Rapa Nui remind us that innovation thrives within constraints. Whether it's the Moai's sway, Stonehenge's potential rock and roll, or Angkor's floating giants, these cultures didn't just move stone, they conversed with it, turning Earth's resistance into a creative partner. If we listen closely, the whispers of Easter Island might yet unlock secrets half a world away. Despite the compelling evidence supporting the walking theory, glaring gaps remain that keep archaeologists awake at night. One unresolved puzzle: the sheer variability in Moai sizes. While experiments have successfully moved smaller replicas, no one has demonstrated the method's feasibility with a full-scale 80-ton colossus, the true test of the theory's validity. Researchers at the University of Hawaii are designing a groundbreaking study using hydraulic simulators to model the forces needed to rock a giant Moai safely. But even these high-tech approximations can't replicate the unpredictable human element of ancient teams working in sync. Another mystery lies in the island's scattered megaliths. Why do some statues appear to have been transported upright while others show signs of horizontal dragging? A joint Chilean-Japanese team plans to analyze mineral deposits on Moai bases next year, comparing microscopic wear patterns from different transport routes. Their goal, to determine if certain terrains or time periods favored specific methods, revealing an evolutionary timeline of Rapa Nui engineering. The role of ceremony in transport also remains speculative. While oral histories describe chanting and rituals, no physical evidence like preserved rope fragments or tool marks aligning with ceremonial practices has been definitively linked to statue movement. A proposed ethnography project aims to interview Rapa Nui elders about lesser-known legends, searching for technical details camouflaged as myth. One tantalizing lead involves a chant said to soften stone. Could this metaphorical language describe a lost technique for reducing friction during transport? Perhaps the most ambitious future study comes from a collective of engineers and traditional Polynesian navigators. They're constructing a 30-ton basalt moai replica using only period-accurate stone tools, then attempting to walk it across Tahiti's rugged landscape under conditions mirroring ancient Easter Island. Unlike past experiments, this one will train participants for months in synchronized pulling techniques borrowed from Polynesian canoe traditions, blending archaeology with living cultural knowledge. Even with these efforts, some questions may never be fully answered. How many statues were lost to transport disasters? What specialized roles existed in moving crews? Each uncovered fragment, a rope groove here, a toppled statue there, adds another piece to the puzzle while reminding us how much has vanished. The walking theory isn't the final word. It's an invitation to keep questioning, testing, and listening to the stones as they reveal their secrets one sway at a time. So where does this leave us in the great Moai mystery? The evidence for the walking theory is both tantalizing and contentious. On one hand, we have the striking experiments, teams of researchers coaxing replicas forward with nothing but ropes and rhythm, their motion mirroring centuries-old Rapa Nui legends. The statues' curved bases, tilted postures, and where patterns align eerily well with the physics of controlled rocking. Then there are the oral histories passed down like sacred heirlooms, insisting the Moai moved with a life of their own. When modern science and ancestral memory converge so elegantly, it's hard not to feel the pull of possibility, yet skepticism lingers like mist over Rano Raraku. No first-hand accounts from the statue-moving era survive, leaving us to piece together clues from fragments and failures. The terrifying risks of upright transport, catastrophic falls, shattered stone seem at odds with the precision these monuments demand. And while small-scale replicas walk convincingly, scaling up to 80-ton giants introduces variables we can't fully test without gambling with irreplaceable heritage. The counterarguments are just as compelling. Horizontal drag marks on some statues, the logistical nightmare of uphill walks, and the sobering reality that no single method likely explains every Moai's journey. Perhaps the truth isn't a binary choice between walking and dragging, but a tapestry of techniques woven across centuries. Early Moai, carved when Easter Island's forests still thrived, might have ridden log sledges to their platforms. Later generations facing barren landscapes could have turned to upright transport, not just out of necessity but as a cultural rebirth, transforming backbreaking labor into sacred performance. The abandoned statues along ancient roads frozen in mid-motion might represent both triumphs and tragedies of this evolution. What's undeniable is the audacity of the Rapa Nui vision. In a world without cranes or wheels, they conceived a way to make stone dance to blur the line between monument and living force. Whether the Moai walked, rolled, or glided, their journeys whisper a universal truth. Human ingenuity thrives where others see impossibility. The real wonder isn't just how they moved, but why they dared to try. Now we turn to you. What's your take on the walking theory? Could these stone sentinels truly have swayed across the island, or does the evidence leave you unconvinced? Drop your thoughts below, and who knows, maybe the next breakthrough won't come from a lab or dig site, but from a viewer's keen eye or a family story passed through generations. After all, some mysteries aren't meant to be solved alone. They are invitations to keep questioning, imagining, and marveling at the boundless creativity of those who came